When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my room, and no matter how hard I screamed, no one could hear me. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the soft, comfortable kind of silence you get late at night, but the hollow, suffocating kind that presses against your skull until your own heartbeat sounds like a gunshot. I sat up, or at least I thought I did. The floor beneath me rippled like water, yet somehow held my weight. My hands trembled when I looked at them, the fingers smearing at the edges, as if reality itself had forgotten how to draw me. That's when the panic set in. I tried to wake up the way you do from a nightmare, digging my nails into my skin, willing my eyes to snap open. Nothing worked. My body felt distant, unreachable, as though I'd been cut loose from it. I shouted for help, my voice bouncing back at me, muffled and warped, like it had traveled through a tunnel miles long. No one answered. The horizon was empty, a gray void that stretched in every direction. And yet, I knew I wasn't alone. The shadows noticed me first. At the corner of my vision, they shivered and bent like smoke, trying to remember it once had a body. I told myself not to look at them, not to acknowledge them, but the moment I turned my head, the closest one twitched forward. A jagged limb slipped across the floor, reaching, pausing, waiting. I didn't dare move. Every instinct screamed at me to wake up, but the dream clung to me like wet fabric, wrapping tighter with every breath. My chest heaved, desperate for air. That felt thinner by the second. It wasn't just a dream. It couldn't be. Dreams don't leave your tongue tasting like ash. Dreams don't make you feel like something ancient and hungry is watching from just out of sight. And here's the part that terrifies me most. I don't think I'm the only one who's been here. Maybe you felt it too, that moment when you wake in the wrong place, when the silence feels heavier than it should, when you know you shouldn't look over your shoulder. If you have, then you already know what I'm about to say. You probably think this sounds like a bad dream. So did the first, until I remembered the first time it happened. Asterisk a few days before all of this started. My life was nothing worth telling stories about. If anything, it was painfully ordinary, boring, to the point of cruelty. I worked long shifts at a job I hated, came home to a one-bedroom apartment that smelled faintly of dust and ramen packets, and fell asleep to the low hum of a fan that rattled like it was dying. My days blurred together in a haze of caffeine and cheap takeout. I told myself I was fine, that exhaustion was just part of being an adult. But in the quiet moments when the city outside went still, when I shut off my phone and the glow of the screen faded, I'd catch myself staring at the ceiling, wondering how long it had been since I'd really felt awake. I joked to friends online that I was basically living in permanent sleep mode. They laughed, threw emojis my way, said I needed a vacation. But the truth was I didn't have anyone to vacation with, and I wasn't sure I even remembered how to rest. Sleep was just something I did so I wouldn't collapse at work. Nothing more. That's what makes what happened next so unnerving. Because for someone who barely cared about dreams, I started noticing them too much. The first one was harmless, just me standing in an empty street that looked vaguely familiar, though I couldn't place it. Street lights flickered overhead, casting light that didn't quite reach the ground. I woke up with a headache and brushed it off. Everyone has weird dreams, right? But the second one was the same street, same lights. Only this time, a shadow moved at the far end. I couldn't see its shape, just the suggestion of someone or something watching. When I woke up, I laughed at myself, muttered, "Wow, spooky." Dream, better call the Ghostbusters, and stumbled into the kitchen for coffee. A moment of bad humor, nothing else. Still, a part of me wondered why my heart was pounding so hard. During the day, little things started to feel off. Déjà vu hit me more often than usual. I'd walk into my apartment and swear I'd left. The lights arranged differently. I'd catch flickers in the corner of my eye, like someone had ducked out of view just before I turned my head. Of course, there was never anyone there. I chalked it up to lack of sleep, stress, maybe even caffeine, withdrawal. But deep down, there was a prickling unease I couldn't explain. Every time I caught myself pausing at the mirror or glancing at the corners of my apartment, I'd shake it off and mutter some joke to myself, anything to keep from admitting that maybe, just maybe, something wasn't right. One night, I set my phone on the nightstand and let it play one of those dumb sleep sounds apps rain on a window, gentle thunder. I figured it might drown out my restless thoughts. Instead, I woke up at 3 in the morning, heart pounding, convinced someone had been whispering just outside my bedroom door. Of course, when I checked, no one was there. The apartment was silent, but the feeling stayed. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I was letting stupid dreams get to me. But you know how sometimes your gut knows something long before your brain admits it? That's what it felt like my body already knew I was standing on the edge of something, even while my mind fought to stay in denial. At first, I laughed it off, but then the dreams started bleeding into reality. The first dream that really stuck with me didn't start like a nightmare. It started with quiet. I remember standing in the middle of a street that stretched endlessly in both directions. The pavement was smooth, almost too perfect, without cracks or stains, like someone had drawn it fresh that morning. Street lights arched overhead, glowing weakly, but their light didn't behave the way light should. It just sort of hung there, suspended without touching the ground. I should have felt calm. There was no danger, no monsters, no blood, just silence. But there was something about the emptiness that made my chest tighten. Cities aren't supposed to be empty. Streets are supposed to carry noise, cars, voices, footsteps. Instead, there was nothing but me, the faint hum of the lights, and a soft static that seemed to buzz just out of hearing range. That I started walking. My footsteps didn't echo. They didn't make any sound at all. That's when I realized I couldn't hear myself breathing either. A chill crept through me, and I muttered under my breath, "This is just a dream, just a dream." That's when I heard it, a voice faint but sharp, like someone whispering through a wall. "You don't belong here." I spun around, but the street was empty. My pulse quickened, but some part of me felt relieved. If there was a voice, that meant there was someone else, right? Even if I couldn't see them. "Hello?" I called out, my own voice trembling. "Is someone there?" For a moment, nothing. Then, my name. The sound of my name stopped me cold. It wasn't shouted or spoken conversationally. It was deliberate, like the speaker wanted me to know they knew me. But I couldn't place the voice, male maybe, or female. It shifted as it echoed, bending in a way that didn't seem possible. I turned in a slow circle, searching the endless road, and that's when I saw it, a single door standing upright in the middle of the pavement about 50 feet ahead. No walls, no building, just a doorframe stuck in the middle of nowhere, painted a pale blue that looked oddly familiar. I walked toward it cautiously, my stomach tightening with each step. The closer I got, the more the air felt wrong-like. It was heavier, pressing down on my shoulders, making it harder to breathe. The door didn't have a knob. It didn't even have hinges. Just a locked seam perfectly shut, daring me to push. When I reached out and touched it, a jolt ran through me, sharp enough to make me stumble back. And then I heard the whisper again, closer this time, "Don't." My hands shook, but curiosity won out. I pressed both palms against the wood and shoved. It didn't move. I shoved again, harder. Still nothing. I felt panic swelling in my chest, the same kind of helplessness you feel when a nightmare freezes your body. But more than that, I felt watched. The air behind me stirred, faint but undeniable. I spun around and swore I saw movement, something ducking behind the glow of a street light. Too far to see clearly, but close enough that I knew it had been standing still until I turned. I started backing away from the door, muttering, "This isn't real. This is just stress. Just stress." And yet, the whole time, deep down, I knew this wasn't normal. I don't dream like this. Nobody does. That the strangest part came after. I woke up with my chest heaving, drenched in sweat, convinced I just had some stress-induced nightmare. But the image of that street stuck with me all day. The flickering lights, the door, the whisper that knew my name. It should have ended there. But later, online, while mindlessly scrolling, I stumbled across something that froze me in place. A forum thread. A user describing dreams of an empty city. They mentioned the humming lights, the silence, even a door in the middle of the street. I don't remember what I typed in response. I just remember my hands trembling as I realized it wasn't just me. Someone else had been there too. And if they had, how many more people had seen it? The next night, the door was still there, and it was unlocked. The second night should have been nothing more than a bad repeat, like reruns on some broken TV. But it wasn't. When I found myself back on that same street, the door now slightly ajar, I felt the weight of inevitability. It wasn't a normal dream, not some random shuffle of my subconscious. This place remembered me. I stepped closer, heart racing. The seam of the door glowed faintly, as if something behind it breathed. Against all reason, I pushed it open. On the other side was no building, no room, just another street. Only this one was darker, lined with windows that all faced inward. Curtains twitched when I walked past, though I never saw who or what was behind them. That's when I started noticing rules. Unspoken ones, but undeniable. Rule 1. Time didn't flow normally here. A few minutes in the dream stretched into hours. The first time I checked my phone after waking up, I realized I'd only been asleep for half an hour, even though the dream had lasted an entire day. Rule 2. Certain places repeated. The empty street, the door, a park bench with peeling paint. The more I walked, the more familiar the geography became, like the world was recycling pieces of itself. Rule 3. I wasn't alone. The shadows didn't move like people. They lingered at the edges, sticking close to walls, stretching into corners where no light could touch them. At first I thought they were tricks of my eyes, but then one of them shifted deliberately, folding itself into a doorway like it wanted me to follow. I didn't. The third night, the dream pressed harder. My footsteps echoed this time, too loud, too heavy, like the world wanted me to hear myself. When I reached the door, it swung open on its own. A figure stood there. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. Their face was blurred, smeared, like wet paint, but their eyes, if they were eyes, burned faintly white. They didn't walk so much as lean forward, hovering closer with each second. And then they spoke. "Don't stay too long, or you'll forget how to leave." Their voice echoed wrong, rippling through the air, vibrating against my bones. I tried to ask who they were, but my mouth wouldn't move. My body refused me. When I finally woke, I jolted upright with a gasp. My heart hammered like I'd been running. But worse, there was a faint red mark on my arm. A perfect handprint, fingers pressed so deep they looked bruised. That's when the dread really set in. By the fourth night, I wasn't sleeping on purpose anymore. I was collapsing. My body ached, my eyes stung, and every time I drifted off, I was back there. Sometimes the streets stretched forever. Sometimes they bent in on themselves, leading me in loops. I learned fast that if I stayed in one place too long, the shadows got bolder, crawling closer until I forced myself to move again. Tried ignoring it during the day, but my body betrayed me. Cuts on my wrists that I couldn't explain, splinters under my fingernails. Once I woke up with gravel in my bed. Real, solid gravel. That's when I turned to the internet. I didn't want to admit what was happening, but curiosity overpowered fear. I found a forum, one of those niche corners of the web, where anonymity makes people spill their darkest secrets. The thread titles were familiar. Dream City with no sky? Does anyone else hear whispers at night? Door in the street, what's behind it? I clicked one at random. A user described the exact same street, the same door, the same sense of being watched. Someone else claimed they'd met a figure too, only theirs said, "Don't look back." The deeper I dug, the worse it got. Scattered among the posts were sudden drop-off users who described escalating experiences, then never logged in again. Replies would pile up beneath their final message. "Has anyone heard from up?" Followed by silence. It was more than a dream. It was a place, and people were vanishing into it. I told myself I could handle it. That maybe my brain was playing tricks on me, filling in details after reading those threads. But the bruises didn't lie. The fatigue didn't lie. I was running on fumes, stumbling through my days, only to collapse at night and wake up back on those endless streets. And every time the figure was closer. Every time the shadows leaned in a little more, I told myself it was just stress. But deep down, I knew this wasn't normal. That's when I realized the dream wasn't just mine. Asterisk, the night it happened, I went to bed, promising myself I'd stay awake. I drank coffee until my stomach churned, scrolled endlessly on my phone, even slapped my own face a few times to keep from nodding off. But fatigue has a way of winning, and somewhere around 4 in the morning, I slipped under dot, and when I opened my eyes, I was back. Only this time it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like life. The air was damp and heavy, sticking to my lungs like wet cloth. The street stretched in front of me, but something about it had changed. Buildings leaned at impossible angles, their windows staring down like half-lidded eyes. The street lights hummed louder, a grating electrical buzz that sank into my teeth. I started walking, telling myself I'd just keep moving until something shifted. Except the streets didn't end. I turned corner after corner, but every road bent back to the same place, the same door in the middle of the pavement. I circled it for what felt like hours, maybe days. My legs ached, my throat burned, but the world didn't change. That's when I realized time wasn't passing right. I checked my phone, useless here. Just a blank screen, but I could feel it in my body. Hunger gnawed at me. My mouth was dry. My eyelids sagged, but I couldn't fall asleep again. I was already asleep, trapped in a layer I couldn't peel away. I remember thinking about my real bed, about the familiar creak of the mattress when I shifted, about the soft glow of my phone, charging on the nightstand. God, what I would have given just to sip burnt coffee from the chipped mug in my kitchen. But none of that existed here. Here, all I had was the endless road, and the door that wouldn't open dot. It wasn't empty, though. The shadows followed me, closer than before. When I glanced behind me, I'd see them peeking out from doorways, stretching across the ground like oil slicks. Once I caught one leaning against a street lamp, its head cocked like it was smiling at me. I ran that time, though I didn't know where to, and then came the faces. I turned a corner and nearly collapsed when I saw them people I recognized, my old classmates. A neighbor I hadn't seen in years, even my mother. They stood in clusters, scattered across the sidewalks, staring blankly into space. Their mouths opened and closed like broken dolls, whispering sounds I couldn't understand. I stumbled toward them, desperate, but when I got close, my stomach dropped. Their features were wrong. Eyes too wide, smiles too sharp, like someone had tried to draw their likeness from memory and failed. Mom? I croaked, reaching for the woman who looked almost like her. Her head snapped toward me, and her jaw unhinged just a little too far. The whisper that came out wasn't hers. Stay? I stumbled back, shaking, fighting the urge to cry. That's when I knew this wasn't just a nightmare. Nightmares don't steal faces. Nightmares don't trap you for days. I wandered aimlessly, too afraid to approach the figures, too afraid to stop moving. The world shifted around me, the streets warped, buildings grew taller, then shrank, like the dream itself was breathing. Sometimes the sky flickered, flashing a pale red before settling back to black dot. It felt like I'd been there for weeks when I finally collapsed on the pavement. My throat was raw, my body heavy, and I remember whispering to myself, "Wake up, please, Wake up." And for once the world listened. I gasped awake in my bed, clutching my sheets, drenched in sweat. The red numbers on my alarm clock read 6:17 a.m. Barely 2 hours had passed. 2 hours in the real world for what felt like an eternity there. For a moment I laughed in relief, shoving my face into the pillow, promising myself I'd never take my creaky mattress or lukewarm coffee for granted again. My room felt like paradise walls, solid and straight, no shadows bending at the edges. But that relief didn't last, because when I dragged myself into the bathroom to splash water on my face, I froze. There was dirt under my fingernails, gravel stuck to my socks, and bruises, faint but undeniable, wrapping around my wrist like fingers that had refused to let go. When I finally woke up, I thought I was safe. I was wrong. The morning after the first trap, I tried convincing myself it was all in my head. Stress, exhaustion, some elaborate case of sleep paralysis with hallucinations sprinkled on top. But the more I tried to rationalize it, the more the real world betrayed me. It started small. I'd be at work, eyes glued to my computer screen, when the edges of the monitor would bend slightly, like the pixels were breathing. Or I'd walk past a mirror and swear, just for a second, the reflection lagged behind me, its head turning slower, its eyes holding mine, even after I'd already looked away. I told myself I was imagining things. I wanted to believe it. But then I started hearing the whispers. At first it was faint, a static hiss like the hum of a distant radio. Then words began to slip through. My name stretched and distorted, curling out from behind closed doors or echoing faintly in crowded rooms where no one was speaking to me. One night, I woke to the sound of footsteps pacing in my apartment. Slow, deliberate. When I leapt out of bed, heart pounding, there was nothing. But the floorboards were still warm. Sleep became unbearable. Every time I closed my eyes, I ended up back in that looping city. I learned more rules the hard way. The longer I stayed in one spot, the quicker the shadows closed in. If I looked at them too long, their outlines sharpened into jagged shapes that didn't belong to any human body. And if I ignored the door too many nights in a row, it moved closer to me, appearing on different streets, lurking at different angles, waiting. The door wanted me to open it, and the dream wanted me to follow the rules, whether I liked it or not. It didn't just stay in the dream anymore. One afternoon, a coworker stopped me in the break room. "Hey," she said, squinting at me, "are you okay? You look drained, like you're not really here." I laughed it off, muttering something about insomnia, but her words stuck. Because she was right, I didn't feel here. The world looked muted, drained of color, like I was watching it through a fogged-up window. The bruises grew worse, too. Not just handprints, now scratches like I'd run through brambles, and once a thin line along my arm that looked suspiciously like writing. I scrubbed it raw under hot water, but the faint impression remained. By then, I'd stopped telling myself it was just stress. I started researching. That's when I stumbled across the urban legend, the dream that eats you alive. According to scattered accounts online, it was a story passed around in whispers on paranormal forums and old message boards. The legend said there was a dream city that fed on people. A place that seemed harmless at first, but grew hungrier the longer you walked its streets. Those who stayed too long lost track of which world was real. Eventually their bodies wasted away while their minds wandered endlessly down roads that never ended. I wanted to dismiss it as just another internet creepypasta. But how do you dismiss something when it's already happening to you? Every sign matched. The emptiness, the shadows, the door. The stories warned of stages. Recognition, the dream feels unusual but escapable. Entanglement, waking life starts to blur, rules emerge. Corruption, the dream bleeds into reality, leaving marks. Consumption, the dream, becomes permanent. I was somewhere between stage 2 and 3. I tried to resist it, to fight. I left lights on, played loud music at night, anything to make falling asleep harder. But it didn't matter. Even if I collapsed at my desk, I ended up there again, walking those looping streets until my legs screamed. The worst moment happened in broad daylight. I was riding the bus home when I glanced out the window and saw it. A familiar door, standing, upright in the middle of an empty lot, pale blue, against the gray concrete dot. No one else reacted. No one else seemed to see it dot, and when I blinked, it was gone. That night, the dream greeted me with silence heavier than usual. The shadows lined the streets like sentries, unmoving, watching. And at the far end of the road, just before the horizon, swallowed the pavement, I saw a figure. Someone I recognized. It wasn't the blurred-faced stranger this time. It was my best friend from years ago, the one I hadn't spoken to since college. He stood perfectly still, eyes locked on mine, expression blank. When I called his name, he didn't respond, just tilted his head and smiled. The smile didn't reach his eyes. I woke drenched in sweat, gasping, clutching my sheets like a lifeline. And when I checked my phone in the dark, I saw a missed call from him, a number I hadn't dialed in years. I couldn't bring myself to call back. I thought I could fight it. I thought I could hold on to the safety of the real world, cling to coffee and mirrors and casual conversations with co-workers. But the dream had other plans. Asterisk, I know how this sounds. A bad dream, sleep paralysis, some anxious mind turning stress into hallucinations. I used to think the same thing until I started digging deeper. And if you're listening to this right now, if you've ever seen that city, if you've walked its empty streets or glimpsed that door at the end of the road, you need to hear this. Because it isn't just me, and it isn't just a dream. At first, my research felt like wandering through nonsense. Conspiracy forums scattered creepypasta, blurry screenshots of evidence that could have been photoshopped. But every thread had something in common. People describing the same architecture, the same empty intersections, the same whispers that followed them home. Then I found the sleep clinic, buried in an old local news archive. Was a short article from the early 90s, something about a government-funded research program at a now abandoned clinic just outside town. The article barely gave details, lucid dreaming studies, sleep cycle disruption, but there was one line that froze me in place. Participants reported recurring visions of an urban environment, uniform in detail, despite being tested. In isolation, that's not how dreams are supposed to work. A week later, I tracked down a PDF of an old psychology journal. In clinical, sterile language, it described cross-dream contamination, patients sharing dream elements without prior contact. Most of the article dismissed it as coincidence, but the footnotes told another story, subjects becoming catatonic. After weeks of the study, trapped in persistent hypnagogic states. In plain words, they never woke up. The clinic was shut down. Officially, it was lack of funding. Unofficially, well, you can guess. Contrast it with the folklore. I found online an old legend passed down in Eastern Europe about the sleeper city. Peasants whispered of a place you could enter if you slept under the wrong moon, a labyrinth of roads that grew inside your mind. They said it was ruled by something they only called the Watchers. Some stories claimed the Watchers weren't evil, just curious. Others said they fed on memory, on identity, on the very sense of self. Science or folklore, it didn't matter. The conclusion was the same. This thing has been here longer than we have, and we've been stumbling into it since. The first person closed their eyes to sleep. The most disturbing discovery, though, didn't come from journals or legends. It came from testimonies. Late one night, I found a forgotten forum post buried in a thread from 2012. The title was simple: Help Can't Wake Up from the City. The poster described the same streets, the same door, even the same rules I'd been piecing together. Their last update read, "If I don't log in tomorrow, don't bother looking. I'm gone." No one ever heard from them again, and here's the part I can't shake. In the replies, someone mentioned that simply reading about the city could act like an infection, like a seed planted in the back of your mind. That once you'd pictured it, you'd almost certainly dream of it eventually. So if you're still here, still listening, think carefully. Because the city doesn't need you to believe in it. It just needs you to imagine it. That's enough to open the door. I wanted to dismiss that as paranoia, internet exaggeration. But then I remembered the first time I dreamed of the city. I hadn't been looking for it, hadn't been primed by stories or images. It just came. Which means maybe it doesn't spread like a virus at all. Maybe it was already there, waiting, and the stories just trigger recognition. The line between scientific explanation and supernatural. Inevitability blurred until I couldn't tell them apart anymore. Neural misfires, shared unconscious archetypes. Psychic contamination, call it whatever you want. But the result is the same. People vanish. People like me. And here's the most terrifying part. I don't think escape is the goal. I think survival is, because once you're marked by the dream, once you've walked its streets, it doesn't let you go. Even now, as I write this, I can feel my vision lag. The walls of my apartment don't look solid. Sometimes when I blink, I see the street lights flickering outside my window, even though I live on the 10th floor. And sometimes I hear a voice just behind me, whispering my name in a tone that is almost but not quite familiar. Maybe you're safe. Maybe you'll never see the door. Maybe you'll never feel the bruises or hear the whispers. But if you have, you've seen the city already. Then you know I'm not exaggerating. You know the shadows don't just watch. They wait, Dot, and the worst part? I'm not sure if I'm awake right now. I knew it was coming. I could feel it in my bones, the heaviness behind my eyes, the irresistible pull of sleep clawing me down, no matter how much caffeine I poured into my system. I locked my doors. I left the lights on. I even considered handcuffing myself upright just to delay the inevitable. But deep down I knew the truth. You don't fight sleep forever, Dot. So when it happened, I didn't resist. I laid down, staring at the ceiling, memorizing every crack in the plaster, every dust mote drifting in the air, as though they were the last real things I'd ever see. Then, with a final breath, I let go, and I fell. Only this time the city wasn't waiting the way I remembered it. The streets weren't empty. They were shifting, alive, curling inward like the ribs of some vast creature. The road beneath me pulsed faintly as if veins carried blood under the asphalt. The dream had changed, Dot. It was adapting. I tested the rules I'd learned, counting intersections, focusing on fixed points, pinching myself to anchor my mind. None of it mattered. The shadows didn't just watch anymore, they followed. I could hear their dragging steps behind me, but every time I spun around, the streets stretched longer and their silhouettes grew sharper. I ducked into an alley, the bricks sweating with a dampness that smelled like rust. That's when I heard it, Dot, my own voice. You were never supposed to wake up. The words echoed from everywhere and nowhere, distorted like a recording played backward. I froze. The figure that stepped out of the dark wore my face, but wrong, the eyes too wide, the smile carved too deep, the skin sagging as if gravity pulled harder there. I tried to warn you. It whispered, and when it moved, the mouth didn't match the sound. I ran. The city twisted to stop me. Streets looped back onto themselves. Storefronts repeated with grotesque variations, mannequins pressing their faces against the glass, their hollow eyes tracking me as I sprinted past. Even the sky betrayed me, dropping lower and lower until the clouds scraped against the rooftops like a lid sealing shut. Everywhere I turned, traps waited. A familiar park bench stretched into a spiked maw. A childhood classroom stood intact, but the desks pulsed like beating hearts. The dream was no longer passive. It was a predator, and I was the prey. I don't know how long I ran. Time doesn't behave normally here. Minutes felt like hours, hours like lifetimes. My legs burned, my lungs clawed for air, but still I pressed on. I told myself if I just kept moving, there had to be a way out. There had to be, but the whispers kept returning. My voice behind me, beside me, inside me. You don't leave. You just forget you were ever awake. That's when I realized escape was never the point. It never wanted me gone, it wanted me consumed. And maybe it wants you too, because here's the thing. I've hidden clues, breadcrumbs scattered in my words, in the timing, in the details of this story. If you've been paying attention, if you've felt that chill of recognition at certain descriptions, you've already brushed against it. Maybe you didn't notice. Maybe you told yourself it was déjà vu. But the city works like that. It plants itself, waits for you to remember it. I'm telling you this because if I don't make it back, maybe one of you can. Maybe you'll spot something I missed, connect dots I couldn't. Maybe you'll understand the rules better than I ever did. Or maybe you'll just fall faster. The streets are closing in now. The shadows are closer. I can see their edges solidifying, arms stretching longer, fingers scraping the pavement as they crawl toward me. And ahead of me, that door, the same one I've seen since the beginning, is finally open. I don't know what's behind it. I don't know if it's freedom or a trap, but I don't have another choice. If this video ends suddenly, you'll know why. Asterisk, I woke up in a dream I couldn't escape, and now neither can you. That's the truth I've been circling around this entire time. You think of sleep as peace, as rest, as comfort, the soft closing of your eyes and the safe return to your bed in the morning. But here, sleep is the lie. Sleep is the trap. Every time my eyelids drop, the city is waiting for me, reshaping itself, whispering my name with voices that sound too much like yours. It's not just the streets, not anymore. The dream has dug itself into me, carving away the seams between what's real and what isn't. When I touch my skin, I can't tell if it's warm or if it's the dream's thin fabric trying to convince me it is. When I blink, I'm never sure what I'll open my eyes to walls of my apartment or alleys slick with breathing stone. I used to beg to wake up. I clawed at my arms, screamed, prayed to whatever was listening. But the more I fought, the less. The dream loosened its grip. Now I wonder if I ever truly left it at all. What if every waking moment has been another layer of the same nightmare, stacked and folded like paper, until the difference between here and there doesn't matter? The worst part? I can't trust my own voice anymore. It follows me echoing, from dark windows, dripping from ceilings, bleeding through the static of broken televisions. Sometimes it tells me to keep running. Sometimes it tells me to give in. And sometimes it laughs. A sharp, jagged laugh that stretches too long, as if the sound itself wants to unravel me. I don't know how much longer I can hold myself together. The streets bend, the skies collapse. The faces I once recognized blur into hollow-eyed masks. Every word I speak feels like it's being fed through a filter, passed along by something that wants you to hear it, too, because you're not safe. If you've listened this far, if you've pictured the gray horizon, the looping streets, the door that never quite opens, you've already touched it. The city is patient. It doesn't need to rush. Maybe tonight, maybe next week, you'll see it. You'll dream of a place you've never been, and it will feel familiar. Too familiar, and when you wake, you'll wonder why your body feels heavy, why your breath comes short, why the corners of your room feel stretched too wide. That's how it starts. That's how it spreads. I woke up in a dream I couldn't escape. And now you know it exists. That knowledge alone is enough. Sometimes I think about surrender, laying down on the trembling streets, letting the shadows finally take me. Maybe it would be quicker than this endless cycle of running and waking and doubting. But then I remember the faces, the hollow eyes, the wrong smiles. I don't want to become one of them. Not yet. Not while I can still warn you, So here's my last request. If you've been there before, if you've walked the city, if you've heard your name whispered from the dark comment below, Tell me I'm not alone. Tell me you've seen it, 2 dot, because if you don't, then I'm already gone dot. And tonight, when you close your eyes, the dream will notice the space I've left behind, and it will come looking for you.